All right, so you know demonology, but have you ever seen it through the eyes of a king?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Today, we're going to crack open King James VI Demonology.
Yes.
We're also going to look at this pamphlet called News from Scotland.
Interesting.
Both of these offer a really unique perspective on what was going on in 16th century Scotland
Yeah.
when anxieties about witchcraft were very real
Absolutely.
and actually kind of woven into the fabric of power.
It's a rare treat to have a text like Demonology written in 1597 by the king herself.
Wow.
Because it's not just a theoretical demonology textbook, it reflects the beliefs and fears that shaped his actions, especially in the North Berwick witch trials.
So it's like we're getting the monarch's personal demonology cheat sheet.
Exactly.
I love it. And he starts it off by laying out all of these definitions.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, here's how W.E. defined magic, sorcery, necromancy, and witchcraft.
Right.
And not just any one of the king.
Yeah, and those definitions highlight the anxieties of that era. Demonology suggests that seemingly harmless practices, what James calls the devil's rudiments, could be the first step on a path toward more serious dealings with demonic forces.
So things like using herbs for healing or hanging a charm over your door.
Yeah.
Practices that today might seem like folk wisdom, not devil worship.
Think of it like this. In a society where the boundary between the natural and the supernatural was really blurry, even seeking a bountiful harvest could be twisted into inviting demonic influence,
Okay.
charms for protection or warding off the evil eye.
Right.
These were viewed as potentially leading down a dark path.
And demonology doesn't just define the devil's playground.
Yeah.
It also maps out how to get there.
Uh-huh.
It describes these summoning rituals, the circles, the conjurations.
Right.
It all sounds pretty intense.
Intense and incredibly risky according to the text.
Okay.
Demonology paints a picture where the magician risks losing control during summoning, potentially facing harm from the entity, or even being tempted into a pact with the devil himself. Imagine the pressure you've mastered, these complex rituals,
Right.
only to find yourself staring into the abyss wondering if it's all worth it.
Yikes.
Yeah.
And that's where demonology gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because it suggests that many magicians, tired of the risks and complexities of these rituals,
Right.
would eventually seek a more direct and dangerous path,
Uh-huh.
a contract with the devil.
Yes.
Talk about cutting out the middleman.
Now, to see how these beliefs played out in reality, we turn to News from Scotland.
Okay.
It's a dramatic account of the North Berwick witch trials, where King James was personally involved.
Wow.
It's a wild story, even by demonology standards.
Okay, let's hear it.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to separate these witch trials from the political climate at the time. King James had just returned from Denmark.
Right.
And there were a lot of anxieties.
Uh-huh.
News from Scotland really plays up the fear portraying this conspiracy against the king, fueled by dark forces.
You have to remember, for the people of that time, this wasn't just a salacious story. This was a confirmation of their deepest fears.
Wow.
News from Scotland claimed that witches tried to sink the king's ship using a bewitched cat.
No way!
That's the kind of detail that sticks with you.
Yeah.
And it certainly helped to solidify the king's narrative of being a target of demonic forces.
It's like a real-life horror movie with the king himself as the protagonist.
Exactly.
And that's where Gallus Duncan enters the scene.
Okay.
She's the first accused witch in the North Berwick trials.
Right.
And News from Scotland does not hold back on the details.
According to the pamphlet, Duncan was known for her healing abilities,
Okay.
which drew suspicion because they seemed almost too effective.
Wow.
Under torture, she confessed and implicated a whole network of witches,
Oh my God.
feeding into the paranoia surrounding the king's safety.
Can you imagine the fear and suspicion swirling around her?
Yeah.
You're good at your job, maybe a little too good,
Right.
and suddenly you're accused of conspiring with the devil.
I did.
And her confession didn't just implicate her, it brought down others, like Agnes Sampson, the wise wife of Keith,
Right.
and Dr. Fian, a schoolmaster.
It's fascinating how the accusations targeted individuals from different social strata,
Yeah.
highlighting this pervasive fear that witchcraft could exist anywhere.
Okay.
These weren't just shadowy figures on the fringes of society.
Right.
They were respected members of the community.
Wow.
And News from Scotland lays out in graphic detail the methods used to extract confessions from the accused.
Reading about those torture methods is truly chilling.
Yeah.
The pillywinks,
Right.
the ropes used for excruciating head wrenching,
Uh-huh.
and then there's the boots,
Yeah.
a device designed to crush the legs.
That's brutal.
It's hard to imagine the pain these people endured.
And then there's the devil's mark,
Okay.
a physical sign of a witch's allegiance.
Uh-huh.
The pamphlet describes how meticulously they searched for this mark, and how its supposed discovery was seen as undeniable proof of guilt.
But if you're being subjected to those kinds of tortures, are you really confessing to your beliefs?
Right.
Or just trying to make the pain stop?
It's a chilling thought.
It is.
We know from historical records that these tortures were real.
Yeah.
But how much of what we read in news from Scotland is genuine belief
Right.
versus coerced testimony born out of sheer terror?
That's a great question. And perhaps the most tragic story from the North Berwick trials is that of Dr. Fian.
Yes, definitely.
News from Scotland really highlights the drama of his case. He was accused of being the witches' register,
Right.
documenting their dark deeds.
Yeah.
And even managed to escape prison at one point.
It's like something out of a Prison Break movie, except the stakes were incredibly high.
Absolutely.
But even escape couldn't save him from the brutal reality of the witch trials.
So what happened?
His recapture only added to the spectacle of his case.
Okay.
The pamphlet describes escalating levels of torture.
Culminating in the tearing off of his fingernails and the crushing of his legs in the boots.
Oh my gosh.
It's a gruesome end to a story fueled by fear, superstition, and political maneuvering.
It's a reminder that even though we're examining demonology as a system of belief,
Yes.
it played out in the real world with real consequences.
Absolutely.
And those consequences weren't limited to the accused.
Right.
Imagine living in a world where a simple charm could be seen as demonic,
Yeah.
where the king himself believed in a vast network of witches plotting against him. How would that shape your daily life, your interactions with your neighbors,
Right.
your understanding of the world?
We'll delve deeper into those questions in just a moment. You know what strikes me about both of these is how they blur the lines between the supernatural and the political.
Yeah.
King James presents himself as like an expert on demonology, but he's also using that knowledge to really consolidate his own power. It's like, listen to me, not just because I'm the king, but because I literally wrote the book on demons.
Exactly.
And the North Berwick trials weren't just about rooting out witches. They were about really reinforcing his authority, especially after his return from Denmark.
Exactly. News from Scotland plays right into this by portraying King James as a target of demonic forces seeking to undermine his rule.
Wow.
It demonizes the accused while elevating the king to this heroic figure battling against the forces of evil.
It's pretty smart.
It is. Is this a conscious manipulation or a genuine belief on the king's part?
It's hard to say for sure, but the timing is certainly suspect.
Yeah.
You know, it's convenient that this supposed demonic conspiracy against the king emerges right when he's trying to solidify his power.
Right.
And News from Scotland is clearly a sensationalized account designed to evoke fear and outrage.
Absolutely.
It plays into the anxieties of the time, portraying witches as this real and present danger to the king and the stability of the realm.
And you have to remember that for the people of the 16th century, these threats were very real. The world was a much more unpredictable and dangerous place, and belief in the supernatural was so widespread.
Right.
If people believed in the power of witchcraft, then these accusations, no matter how outlandish they seem to us now, would have held real weight.
Yeah, you're right.
Imagine living in a community where your neighbor could curse your livestock, or a storm could be blamed on a witch's spell.
Wow.
That's a reality shaped by fear and the belief in unseen forces.
Absolutely. And when the king himself is endorsing these beliefs, that fear is amplified like tenfold.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But, beyond the political machinations, demonology offers this really fascinating look at the way people understood the demonic realm. It's interesting how King James draws all these parallels between the workings of God and the workings of the devil.
Yeah, it's almost as if he's presenting the devil as this, dark reflection of God.
Okay.
Mimicking divine practices, but twisting them towards evil ends.
Right.
Just as God has his sacraments and rituals, the devil has his own demonic parodies.
Interesting.
Designed to lure people away from the true faith.
It's like the devil is trying to create his own twisted version of God's kingdom, complete with rituals, hierarchies, a congregation of witches.
That's a very astute observation.
Thank you.
And it reflects a key aspect of demonology, the belief that the demonic realm is structured and organized,
Okay.
a kind of dark mirror to the divine order.
Right.
It's not just chaos and evil, it's a system with its own rules and hierarchies.
And this idea of a demonic hierarchy is really apparent in the descriptions of the witches' Sabbaths.
Yes.
They're portrayed as these nocturnal gatherings where witches gather to worship the devil, perform rituals, plan their nefarious deeds.
And those descriptions often draw upon pre-Christian folklore and pagan beliefs,
Uh-huh.
further blurring the lines between different traditions.
Interesting.
It's as if Christianity absorbed those older beliefs and cast them in a new light, transforming them into tools of the devil.
So both demonology and news from Scotland seem to agree that the devil is the source of a witch's power.
Right.
It's not something they possess inherently. It's a gift from their demonic master.
Mm-hmm.
But if a witch's power comes from the devil, what does that say about their free will?
Okay.
Are they just puppets, or do they make a conscious choice to embrace evil?
That's a question that theologians and demonologists have wrestled with for centuries.
Right.
Demonology doesn't portray witches as simply possessed or coerced.
Uh-huh.
It acknowledges their agency,
Okay.
albeit a corrupted agency influenced by the devil's temptations.
Right.
It suggests that witches enter into this pact with the devil for very human reasons.
Okay.
For revenge, for power, for material gain.
It's a complex issue,
It is.
and it raises questions about the nature of evil itself.
Uh-huh.
Is evil an external force, or is it something that resides within us all?
Demonology seems to suggest that evil is both external and internal.
Okay.
The devil is a real force,
Right.
but he can only tempt us. He can't force us to sin.
Okay. Ultimately, the choice lies with the individual. One of the most enduring aspects of witchcraft lore is this concept of transformation.
Yeah.
The idea that witches could shapeshift into animals, fly through the air,
Right.
even transport themselves to distant places.
Mm-hmm.
How does demonology reconcile these fantastical beliefs with the king's supposed rationality?
That's where King James gets really interesting.
Okay.
Demonology offers these explanations that blend folklore with attempts at rational thought.
Mm-hmm.
For example, it suggests that the devil can manipulate perceptions,
Okay.
creating illusions of flight or transformation.
So it's not necessarily that the witches are physically changing form,
Right.
but rather that the devil is playing tricks on people's minds, making them believe they're seeing something that isn't really there.
Precisely.
Wow.
It's a way of explaining these seemingly supernatural phenomena within a framework that maintains the devil's power,
Right.
but also acknowledges the limitations of the physical world. It's a balancing act between superstition and a burgeoning scientific worldview.
But even while attempting to rationalize some aspects of witchcraft, demonology doesn't dismiss all claims as mere trickery.
Right.
There are certain acts like causing illness or influencing the weather
Yeah.
that the book attributes to genuine demonic power.
Right.
It's fascinating how King James tries to draw this line
Uh-huh.
between what he considers real magic
Yeah.
and what's simply deception or delusion.
That distinction is crucial because it reveals the nuanced nature of witchcraft beliefs at the time.
Uh-huh.
Not everything was seen as an illusion.
Okay.
There was a genuine belief in the devil's ability to influence the physical world and to inflict harm upon individuals.
And that belief had very real consequences, as we've seen with the North Berwick trials.
Absolutely.
Demonology also offers methods for combating witchcraft,
Okay.
focusing on prayer, repentance, and, of course, the punishment of witches.
Those methods reflect the deeply religious worldview of the time. Witchcraft wasn't just a crime, it was a spiritual battle, a clash between the forces of God and the forces of evil.
Both demonology and news from Scotland, while separated by genre, paint this really vivid, if disturbing, picture of a world where belief in the supernatural was just so deeply intertwined with everyday life, with politics, and with the very fabric of society.
They offer a glimpse into a world where the line between the real and the unreal was much blurrier than it is today.
Mm-hmm.
And they remind us that even though we might dismiss these beliefs as superstition,
Right.
it had a profound impact on the lives of real people.
You're absolutely right. And while we can analyze these texts from a historical and intellectual perspective,
Yeah.
it's important to remember the human cost.
Absolutely.
The individuals accused, tortured, and executed were not just characters in a historical drama.
Right.
They were real people caught up in this whirlwind of fear and superstition.
It's crucial to remember that.
It is. It makes you wonder what King James would make of the modern world.
It's fascinating to consider, isn't it? We live in a world that's vastly different from 16th century Scotland,
Yeah.
but many of the same anxieties persist.
I agree.
We might not believe in witches in the same way,
Right.
but we have our own monsters, our own fears of the unknown.
So as we move into the final part of our exploration, let's consider this.
Okay.
If King James were alive today, what would his demonology look like?
That's a good question.
What would he consider the devil's rudiments of the modern age?
Now, that's a question worth pondering.
It is.
What beliefs, practices, or technologies might he view as potential gateways to darkness?
Right.
What anxieties would he seek to exploit?
That's a fantastic question, and we'll explore it in more detail after a quick break. Okay, so we've explored the world of demonology and the North Berwick witch trials, but it's not just a dusty history lesson.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
It makes you wonder, what would King James make of our modern world?
Yeah, would he even recognize our anxieties?
Or would they seem completely alien to him?
It's a fascinating thought experiment, isn't it?
It is.
On the surface, our world is vastly different from 16th century Scotland.
Right.
We have science technology, a much broader understanding of the world. But when you look deeper, some anxieties haven't changed that much.
You're right. We might not fear witches in the same way, but we still grapple with the unknown.
Yeah.
Think about our fascination with conspiracy theories, anxieties surrounding artificial intelligence,
Right.
even the resurgence of interest in astrology and the occult.
Exactly. It seems we have this inherent need to grapple with what we can't fully explain, to find meaning in the shadows, even if those shadows take a different form today.
Yeah.
Remember how demonology warned about those devil's rudiments? Those seemingly harmless practices that could lead to deeper darkness?
Right.
What would King James consider the modern equivalents?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Would it be the constant stream of information online, where anyone can claim to be an expert blurring the lines between fact and fiction? Or perhaps the allure of quick fixes and instant gratification, promising happiness but potentially leading to emptiness and a craving for more?
Those are excellent examples.
Thanks.
And just as King James used demonology to define what was acceptable and what was heretical, we see similar dynamics today.
Okay.
Think about how fear of the other, whether it's based on religion, ethnicity, or political beliefs, is often used to manipulate public opinion and justify discriminatory actions.
Right.
The language might have changed, but the underlying tactics feel eerily familiar.
It's chilling to think about how those age-old anxieties can be exploited even in our supposedly enlightened times.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder that the human capacity for fear and manipulation hasn't really disappeared.
Right.
We might not burn people at the stake anymore, but the potential for scapegoating and persecution is still there.
Exactly. And that's why studying texts like Demonology and News from Scotland is so important.
Okay.
They offer a window into how those anxieties have manifested in the past,
Yeah.
and they challenge us to be more critical thinkers in the present.
Okay.
They remind us to question the narratives we're being fed, to challenge those in power who exploit our fears for their own gain.
It's a call to be more discerning about the information we consume,
Absolutely.
to be more aware of the ways in which fear and superstition can be used to divide us.
Precisely. And perhaps by understanding the anxieties of the past, we can be more vigilant in recognizing and combating those same anxieties when they rear their heads in our own time.
So while we might be fascinated by the fantastical elements of 16th century demonology, the real takeaway is a deeper understanding of ourselves, our anxieties, and our enduring need to grapple with the unknown.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that the battle between reason and superstition, between tolerance and fear, is one that's still being fought today.
And each of us has a role to play in that battle.
Well, thanks for joining us on this journey through the fascinating and sometimes unsettling world of 16th century demonology.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope it sparked your curiosity, challenged your assumptions, and left you with some food for thought. What are the devil's rudiments looking in your world?
Ooh, good one.
That's something for you to ponder. Until next time. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop seeking knowledge, even in the shadows.